"There is a light in the east wing," said Corwin, Duke of Mawbray, setting down his cup. "There is no east wing, your grace," his hostess answered, without so much as a flicker, and passed him the sugar. He let it go, because a guest does. But he had been standing at the window of the Blue Saloon at Selby Court for a quarter of an hour before dinner, and he had seen a candle move behind a shuttered casement on the second floor of a range of rooms that Lady Corisande Selby had just informed him did not exist. And Corwin had not got to be 38 in possession of 9,000 acres by mistaking what he saw with his own eyes. He had come about the canal. The Mawbray cut was to run 4 miles along the valley floor, and 2 of those miles were Selby ground, and Corwin had come in person to be certain of the levels, because he did not trust other men's arithmetic. Lady Corisande had received him with a great deal of soft ceremony and had produced her daughter, Miss Delphin, at intervals throughout the afternoon the way a conjurer produces the same card. At 10 that night he walked back through the house alone with a candle, having taken the wrong stair on purpose. The east passage was cold and smelled of dust and lamp oil. At the end of it was a door, and the door was locked, and the key was on the outside, which told him rather more than he wanted to know. Through the wood he could hear a woman's voice, reading aloud. Not to anyone. Reading the way a person reads when the sound of the words is the only company in the room. He stood in the dark and listened to 11 lines of Latin, a passage on the setting of boundary stones, from a surveyor's manual 2 centuries old, and then he turned the key and opened the door. The room beyond was small, clean, and shockingly bare. A bed, a washstand, a deal table under the window, and books. Books in stacks along the wall, books on the sill, a book open on the table beneath a working lamp. And at the table, half risen, a young woman in a plain brown gown with a pen still in her hand. She turned her face away. It was done in one movement, so fast and so practiced that it was clearly the first thing she had ever learned to do. She put her left side into the shadow and her right toward him and stood absolutely still, and said in a perfectly level voice, "The door is kept locked, your grace. You will have the housemaid dismissed." "I will not," Corwin said. "Who are you?" "Margarite Selby, Sir Henry's daughter." His elder daughter. A pause. By his first wife. Corwin came into the room and set his candle down on the table, and then he did the thing he thought of afterward as the first sensible act of his life. He walked round the table and stood on her left, so that she had nowhere left to hide it. She flinched. Then she lifted her chin and let him look. A burn ran from her left temple down across her cheek to the line of her jaw, old and long-heeled, the skin drawn silver pale in places and rose in others, and the eyebrow above it grew only halfway. The same silver marked the back of her left hand which held the pen. Corwin looked. He did not do it quickly, to get it over, and he did not do it slowly, to prove something. He looked as a man looks at a face he intends to know. "You are on the wrong side, your grace," she said. Her voice was not quite steady now. "I do not think so." He picked up the book on the table and turned it toward the lamp. "How long have you been up here?" 9 years. "How many days in the year?" Margarite Selby said, "When there are visitors, I may use the library after 11 at night." "There are rather a lot of visitors." Corwin was quiet for a moment. He had a temper. He had spent 20 years learning to put it somewhere out of the way, and he put it there now, carefully, because it was not going to help her. "What are you drawing?" he asked instead. She hesitated, and then she moved the lamp, and he saw what was pinned out across the deal table. It was a survey. A proper one, chained, levelled, and inked with the field boundaries of the whole Selby Valley, the fall of the ground marked in feet and inches, the springs, the old marl pits, the drift of the clay along the western slope. It was the finest piece of estate draughtsmanship he had seen outside London. Corwin had a copy of that map in his saddlebag. He had paid 90 guineas for it. It was signed in the corner by Lady Corisande's brother, Mr. Barnaby Gull. He looked at the hand on the table. He looked at the hand on the map in his memory. They were the same hand. "Mr. Gull," he said, "cannot level a garden path." "Mr. Gull," said Marguerite, "carries the chain very well when he is sober. My father thought it best the corner should have a man's name on it. He was probably right. Nobody would have bought it otherwise. I bought it." "Then you bought mine, your grace, and I hope you had your money's worth." She said it flatly, without self-pity and without any appeal in it all. and Corwin found that his chest had gone strangely tight. "Your line along the western slope," he said. "You have taken the cut 50 yards south of where my engineer put it. Because your engineer put it through the clay drift, and in the second winter it will slip and take your towpath into the river, and everyone will blame the frost." She met his eyes for the first time. "I did tell him." "You wrote to him?" "Twice. He replied to Mr. Gull both times." Corwin sat down, uninvited, on the edge of the deal table in the room where the Selbys kept their eldest daughter, and said, "Miss Selby, show me the clay." They were still at it at 2 in the morning. The lamp burned low. The map waited at the corners with books, when Corwin looked up and realized that in 4 hours she had not once turned her face away. He stayed 11 days at Selby Court on the business of a canal that had been settled by the 3rd. Lady Corisande was charm itself, and grew, day by day, a little brittler at the edges. Corwin walked the valley in the mornings with a chainman and a level and Miss Margarite Selby in an old brown cloak, because he had informed his hostess that the surveyor's assistant would be required in the field, and had said it in the voice he generally kept for the House of Lords. He learned that Margarite could read 3 languages, none of them taught to her, that she had had every book in Selby Court carried up those stairs one at a time by an old nurse named Agnes, and that she laughed when she forgot to guard it with her whole face. He learned other things in the village, quietly, from a wheelwright and a curate and Agnes herself. There had been a fire in the west schoolroom 9 years before, on a February night, a candle left too near a muslin curtain. Miss Delphine had been 11 and asleep, and the door had jammed in the frame with the heat. Margarite Selby had been 15. She had gone in for her sister and she had brought her out, and the whole of what happened to her face had happened in the 90 seconds it took to do it. Delphine had not a mark on her, and 9 years later the house that owed its second daughter to the first daughter's courage kept the first daughter behind a locked door, because a scarred girl at the dinner table is bad for the marrying of an unscarred one. Corwin walked back from the village that afternoon and did not trust himself to speak to anybody until dinner. Lady Corisande, it turned out, had been making arrangements of her own. She had gathered 14 people to Selby Court that night, the Gulls, the rector, 2 families from Wexbridge, everyone who might be expected to carry a story home. She had put Delphine on the Duke's right in rose silk. And between the fish and the game, she rang the bell, and the doors opened, and Agnes brought Margarite in. She had been dressed for it. That was the cruelest part, and Corwin understood it at once. Pale green silk, her mother's pearls, her hair done, dressed to look, for one instant, exactly like a daughter of the house, and then set down under the full blaze of the candelabra with her left side to the room. "Your Grace has been so very kind to my husband's elder girl," said Lady Corisande in a voice like warm milk. "We keep her quiet, poor creature, for her own comfort. But you have been walking out with her these 11 days, and I could not let you go on in ignorance." She turned Marguerite gently by the shoulder toward the light. "There. Now you see what you have been visiting." 14 people looked. Somebody's fork rang on a plate. Marguerite stood in the middle of that room with her hands at her sides. She did not put her chin down. She did not cover herself. She looked at the far wall as she had learned to look at things for 9 years, and waited for it to be over. Corwin rose. "Madam," he said, "you have made an error, and I am going to correct it in front of your guests, because you chose the room." The warm milk went out of Lady Corisande's face. "I have been at Selby 11 days on the business of the Mawbray cut. In that time I have been shown a survey of this valley, for which I paid 90 guineas to a Mr. Barnaby Gull." He looked down the table at Mr. Gull, who had gone the colour of the tablecloth. "It was drawn chained and levelled by the woman standing in your doorway. It is the best work of its kind I have ever held in my hands, and it has already saved me £1,100 and a collapsed towpath. I have the field books. They are in her hand, and they are dated. From tomorrow the Mawbray Canal Company will contract with the surveyor who drew that map, by her own name at her own fee, and every shilling this house receives for its 2 miles will pass through her signature, because I will not sign a paper that says otherwise." The silence had gone very deep. "Second," Corwin said, "in February of '99 there was a fire in the west schoolroom of this house. Miss Delphine was carried out of it." He turned deliberately to look at Delphine Selby in her rose silk. By whom, madam? Delphine's mouth trembled. She was 20, and she had spent 9 years being told a comfortable story, and Corwin watched her decide, in front of everybody, whether she believed it. By my sister, she said. And then, to her mother in a thin voice, by Margarite. You know she did. You were in Bath. Third, said the Duke of Mawbray, you have described your husband's daughter as a creature to be kept quiet for her own comfort. I have walked 11 days with her, and I have never once been in the company of a better mind, and she has never asked me for anything, and she did not ask me for this. He came round the table then, and stopped in front of Marguerite, and did not touch her. Miss Selby, I would like to say the rest of it to you and not to them, but they have had the whole of your face tonight, and they may as well have the whole of my meaning. Come to Mawbray, not as a guest and not as an object of anybody's charity. Come and set out the line of my canal at a proper fee in your own name in daylight, and dine at my table when the day's work is done. That is the offer. There is nothing hidden underneath it. Margarite Selby looked at him for a long moment. And if I said yes because I have nowhere else, she said, you would have bought me for the price of a door. Then say no, Corwin said, and I will take the offer to you again next year, and the year after, until you say yes for a reason that satisfies you. I am a patient man and have a great deal of canal. She laughed. It broke out of her, wrecked and astonished, and half the table jumped. She came to Mawbray in the spring, and she did not dine at his table for 4 months, and he did not press it once. She set out the cut. She rode the line in the mornings with the chain men, who learned within a fortnight to bring their arithmetic to her and not to the engineer. She took her fee and opened her own account at the bank at Wexbridge, and the first thing she bought with it was a horse, and the second was a pair of spectacles for Agnes, whom she sent for. Corwin courted her the whole while badly and openly, and everyone at Mawbray knew it before she did. He asked her in October, on the towpath, standing on the very 50 yards she had moved south out of the clay. You will hear it said that I married you out of pity, he said. I want you to know that I have thought about that a great deal, and I find I have no pity for you whatsoever. Pity is for people something has been taken from. Nothing has been taken from you. It was spent deliberately by you at 15 to buy your sister's life, and you would pay it again tomorrow, and everyone who has ever taught you to be ashamed of the bill has been a fool. He took her scarred left hand and held it palm up in both of his. I am asking because I am in love with you and have been since the second night, when you told me my engineer was an idiot. Marry me, Margarite. She said yes on the towpath in the rain, with her face turned squarely up to his. They were married at Mawbray in December. She wore no veil. Lady Corisand wrote to ask whether the family might attend, and Margarite invited them, and seated her stepmother between the rector and the wheelwright, and was perfectly, unassailably kind to her all day, which was the worst thing she could possibly have done. Delphine cried through the whole service, and afterward asked her sister, in a small voice, whether she might come and stay sometimes, and Margarite said yes to that too. There is a portrait in the great hall at Mawbray that visitors still stop in front of. It is of a young duchess in green, seated at a table with a survey unrolled before her and a pen in her left hand, and the artist has set her 3/4 to the tall window so that the north light falls full and clear along the left side of her face, silver and rose every line of it plain. Corwin chose the pose himself and sat with her every one of the 11 sittings, and when the painter suggested, delicately, that her grace might prefer to turn the other way, the Duke of Mawbray said that his wife had spent 9 years turned the other way, and that the house had a great many windows now, and that she would be facing the light in his hall for the next 400 years, and everyone who came through the door could learn to look at her properly, as he had.